Hey, everybody. Let's clear that up real quick. There we go. Hey, Jeff Colson, junior hockey advisor on a Wednesday night, 9 o'clock, getting the Dukes up, getting ready to go here. All right, we got Bloomer on. Mike Bloom's on from Chicago. I'm in Western New York right now. This is junior hockey advisor over here. This is junior hockey advisor, and we're here to help you understand the process and the development cycle, how to ascend in the game. I hate the word the development. It's so overused. It's a terrible word. I try not to ever use it. Sorry about that. But we work on the development.
There you go again.
It's like this whole thing with the politics now with with the trans stuff, the trans people, and how to explain what a woman is. And people go, a woman is somebody that acts like a woman. And it's like, that's circular. It's same with the word development. I hate it. I'm not saying I hate trans. I'm just saying I hate the word development. Let's get that real quick, real clear. Okay. We're going to have fun tonight. Bloom, are you ready?
I'm ready, man. You sent the internet on a firestorm over the week.
I did nothing but say, hey, there was two ways to do it. Okay. It was going to get posted. In fact, it tried to get posted several other times. And people were coming at it attacking. So I looked at it and I said, let's look at a 37-1 score and try to post the wrong answers on what happened. So let's have fun with, maybe the scorekeeper had only done football games in the past. So every time there was a goal, he was either giving them 3 or 6 points or something. I wanted to have fun with it. It didn't go that way at all. It just, nobody caught on to that side of it. A couple did, but nobody really embraced it and came up with some really good things. And I had my list and I was ready to go. I was ready to play. And once again, when we say play, there was nobody going after the players. Nobody wanted to go after the losing team, but it's the score. It's absurd. You just don't hear about that kind of score. And it could have been a lot of fun. It could have been a lot of fun at nobody's expense. You can't hide from a 37-1 score if you're either one of those teams. But you could have had fun with it, which would have stopped the critique, and the critique still came in. Then I had the debate with, well, if I pull it down, it looks like I'm favoring one side or the other. Let's leave it up. And then we let the coaches each have, their shots. They come in with some lefts and some rights. They were actually both pretty decent about it. And then we let a counter argument come in. Then we let a rebuttal come in. Then we just stopped all that and said, let's save this for Wednesday. So it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
I think the best part about the whole interaction was the fact that we did get statements from both coaches and they both contributed and things like that. So it went a lot further than just, internet trolls per se, just, blasting away on a team or the situation. So it actually had some good in it.
We set up some ground rules tonight because Mike and I both have a lot of opinions on this, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. We're going to open up chat here in a second. We'll do that right now. We'll add chat on there so that you can as soon as they start coming in, they'll pop up right next to Mr. Bloom. And right now, if you got something to say about this, jump on, put a comment on there. If it ain't so good and it starts getting a little bit dicey, we're going to take away the comments because we're even debating, how do you have this conversation without it getting tilted or slanted, where both of us feel like we're throwing the power drives or the pile drivers into one team or the other. That's not the point here. The point here is to try to debate and look at both sides of this issue, try to find some positives. Maybe there's some suggestions to be made. Maybe there's no suggestions to be made. I don't know. But it's worth looking at and it's worth talking about. So we're going to go a few minutes and, I'm going to take one side of it. Bloom's going to take the other side of it. Then we're going to switch. We're going to try to look at it from both sides. So we'll counter back a little and back and forth here. So we're trying to come in this with a little bit of a plan, a little bit of pragmatic criticism. Ooh, that was good. That's the University of Michigan education popping out right there. Okay.
And I didn't understand it. That's the Western Michigan education coming out.
There you go. I was going to say that, but you beat me to it. So, all right, let's jump in right now. Justin is a coach that's also part of our discussion group. He's on the chat side of things. And he just popped in and said, how do we go from here? Hey, Justin, when it's time, if there's something to be said, throw a chat up and we'll either work it in if you got a question. If you got a comment that fits, we'll throw it up on the board. That's the way we normally do it. So thanks for being there. Anybody else that wants to say hi? Anybody else that wants to jump in? Say hello. Tell us where you're at. Tell us what your thoughts are, and if appropriate, we'll throw it up. That's kind of the way it works. All right, let's start it. What do you want to start out with? I'm thinking, let's give the backstory to this a little bit. Bloom, you want to do that just so you get a chance to talk a little bit?
Well, I think the first thing we should probably make sure we point out is we don't have any affiliation with either program. Like, there's
Yep.
no history with any of the coaches or the programs in general. So, I think we're taking this, like, take the programs themselves. And I know the coaches kind of got into, a little bit of back and forth and whatnot, but take the programs and the coaches out of it. And then just let's look at a game that is played with this type of score or outcome. And that's how I think we should attack this.
USPHL game, it's a divisional game, meaning these two teams face each other numerous times during the year. It's a Midwest battle. It's the Metro Jets out of Detroit, which, Bloom, I know you've had more experience being around that area versus me, because I've been out of the Detroit market for a very long time. And I don't scout the Metro Jets when I am in town. I'm looking at 16s and 18s. So I don't get a chance to watch, any Tier 3 junior hockey. So we've got USPHL Premier, Metro Jets, and they were playing the Columbus Mavericks. Tell us a little bit about the Metro Jets, what you know, and a little bit about what, from your perspective, Mike, because you just know a little bit more about the program, I assume, than I do. If not, I got notes.
Yeah, the only reason I know more about it is obviously growing up in that area. I still have connections to the people that are involved in hockey and the rink that they play in and things like that. And then they have a AA program. The Metro Junior Jets, or the Metro Jets, is a AA program out of Detroit. Typically, they have some pretty good teams that I'll coach against, as we go into different tournaments and whatnot. So I'm familiar with their youth program more so than their USPHL Premier program. But I do have a player that I previously coached that does play for the Jets, and I haven't really connected with him, probably 3, 4, 5 years.
In all fairness, so it's a suburb. Do they play out of Macomb? Where do they play out of?
I think they play out of Fraser.
Isn't that called something different now, like the Macomb Arena?
Great Lakes something. I don't know what it's called now.
If you grew up in Detroit, Fraser started out like in the 60s as a single rink. And now there's like 8, and there's all these dark corridors to get you from one rink to the other. And it's like you think you're in Harry Potter. You're walking up a staircase and it turns and it goes back down again. It's a freaky rink as far as trying to figure out the lay of the land. It's not a new modern rink. They just added on rinks wherever they could. And sometimes there was like walkways across the moats and stuff to get to the next place you had to go. Really, really interesting rink. I grew up playing there too, but it's completely changed now. That's just a little background for those that don't know the suburbs of Detroit or the Detroit era. Somebody just put up here they play out of the Mount Clemens rink. Is Mount Clemens Mount Clemens would be its own rink, right?
I used to actually play for the Mount Clemens Wolves, so they must have moved at some point to the Mount Clemens rink from Fraser, because I'm pretty sure they played out of Fraser at one point.
I thought they played out of Fraser right now. That's just from old school thought process on there. Columbus, here's what we can tell you. They're 5 years in the league, I believe. I think they've got about 5 years in the league. They've had one successful year. They're in a division that is super tough. They are not a last place team. Let's make that very clear. This is a middle of the pack, or let's say there's the haves and the have-nots in this division. They're on the top of the have-nots, and the only reason I say have-nots are the teams that are getting destroyed when they play. Okay, so there are 2 teams that are below them. This is a single owner franchise, meaning this is not a youth organization that owns them. It's not a rink that owns them. It's not a town ownership or a township ownership or anything like that. This is a single owner, which is common, more so common in the USPHL than in most areas now. You do see it a little bit in the NA3, but You're seeing less and less of that in the major hockey, in major junior hockey. When I say major, I'm not talking about Canadian major. I'm just talking about the bigger programs. When you start getting into the USHL, you start getting into the NAHL. I'm sorry, folks. I'm just ready to go. In those situations, you're starting to see more partnerships, more corporations, and less of just the single owners. They're still out there. Doesn't mean it's bad or good. It just means that's the way it is with this team. It tends to recruit very local, and it tends to have a lot of players coming right out of high school, and not too many veteran junior players that are coming over the team. So that's the basic background. We've got a lot more information, but that's really the basics. So, anything you want to add before we start going?
No.
Okay. All right. Kurt from Dayton, Ohio's on. It is about an hour from Columbus. Interesting. It doesn't. I wonder if that moves him more in the middle. Is he like the Toledo between the University of Michigan and Columbus, where he can see both sides? Who knows? Kurt, tell us.
He's Switzerland.
He's Switzerland. I like that. Okay. 37-1. I'll take the side of Columbus first. You take the side of the Jets. And my first statement is, what the F? Why are you doing that? What's the purpose? Where's the sportsmanship? Couldn't you back off at 10 goals? Is there any need for that kind of score? That's my opening salvo.
Yeah. I mean, having not watched the game, it's hard to know if they did back off or not, right? What if the score could have been 50-1, and they backed off and made it 37-1. But, one of the things that I think of quite frequently with the teams that I coach, and first let me say, as I've been in a part of hockey for probably 35 years, 22 coaching, and the other maybe 20 or so, or less than that, because I'm not playing when I wasn't born. But anyway, 35 years of hockey, I've never seen or been a part of a score that was that lopsided. But there has been games where, as a coach, I'm constantly trying to get my players not to play down to the level of the competition. And that's a huge struggle, especially more so now than it ever was when I was coaching, just the way today's athlete is. So number one, you never want to pick up bad habits in a game. And, I don't like the mentality of you got to pass the puck 5 times. You got to, do all these different things. Your forwards got to play D, your D got to play forwards. You're throwing your whole team out of whack for one game because there's an opponent that doesn't meet the standards of, a typical competition. That's not my fault as a coach.
I hear you.
This game is on our schedule. We need to play and play the right way so it doesn't carry over to the next game. So number one, I'm not a big fan of calling off the dogs unless it's like an unsafe situation where, there might be games where you could borderline injure somebody because they're that far off the level of competition. If it's something like that, then yes, there's got to be a way to step in and say, you're not blowing guys up. You're not dropping the gloves with anybody. You're not doing any of these things. But when it comes to playing hockey, like, you have to still play. And it's up to the other team to stop you and devise a plan, whether it's you got to jam the front of the net and you got to ice pucks and you got to do something different to stop us. That's a different story, because I'll tell you, I've been on sides where we've been getting beaten pretty good, and the other team starts doing the 5 pass, or they start doing the 4 corner keep away and all that. That is so frustrating to have to play against. That to me is worse when teams do that. It's more embarrassing to play keep away and do all this other stupid shit on the ice than just play the game. And it may make the score look better at the end, but it does not make you as a coach or your team feel any better losing a game 15-1, and they played keep away for the whole third period. I don't like that on either side of it. I wouldn't want to do that as a coach on the winning side, and as a losing side, I would rather you just play the game and knock the snot out of us than start getting all stupid with how you're playing against us.
So let's answer a question right now. Very good, Mike. I don't know if I disagree with anything you're saying, but just tossing this up here so it's there. is in response to the above, I could be wrong, but Metro Jets have two premier. Shouldn't they be NCDC? That's an easy answer as far as NCDC. The NCDC is not going to pick up a team in Michigan. They've got their Western states teams now, and they've got their Eastern. Now, Syracuse and Rochester and even Springfield, back when the NCDC was in their fledgling stages, were highly pressured they basically force you out. Why they did that at that time is nobody that core of NCDC teams are nice and tight. Their travel schedule on the East Coast, they don't want outliers. So they're not going to let Michigan in unless Michigan said, hey, we'll pay for everything. We'll pay for all the travel to the East or all the travel for the West. And I don't know of anybody that wants that budget. There was a deal like that in the North American Hockey League with the Rochester Americans going back, back when the Rochester Americans were in the Null for 1 or 2 seasons. And in that situation, it was the travel budget was bigger than the AHL travel budget. So that lasted a very small time because, how do you afford it? How do you afford to, fly a team to Dallas to play, fly a team to Michigan, because the standards were that they couldn't have 10-hour bus rides. It just didn't fit. You had to fly teams. You couldn't stay on the bus for 3 days to get down to Dallas from Rochester, New York, So they just won't do that. The league won't do that. So they're not gonna allow a team from Michigan in. Now, maybe they expand at some point and they open up a Midwest NCDC division, but we're already seeing that they're struggling with the NCD level of talent that's in the West already. So you're just diluting the product if they continue to add teams to the NCDC. I'm not saying that the Metro Jets would be a dilution, but if you put a whole nother division in, it'd be the same thing that you're seeing in the BCHL. The BCHL, when they just did this 5-team expansion, they didn't improve the BCHL as far as talent level. They actually brought the average talent down because they brought in AJ teams. Now, doesn't mean there's not talent there, but it doesn't work that way. You don't add teams to improve the skill level of each team and the competitiveness. So, all right, I hope that one helped as we go along. So look at this. This is rare.
Hey, I'll take it.
Totally agree with you. That's good. Guy above asked about Columbus playing elite. Facebook user, I don't know what that really ties into. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Let's go Metro, baby. Okay. I already got people jumping in on one side or another. In response to okay, we'll leave it at that. Let's see what this says. Got one more here. Replying to Facebook user, Columbus Magic is only premier as of now, but next year is looking at adding an elite team. Okay, that's great. All right, let me give you my take on this. You went about 10 minutes on that, right?
Sure.
Do I need okay. This is meant to be helpful, not hurtful. But I look at the Mavericks and say there's many questions that should be asked. Many questions that should be asked. Okay, league average of age, they're almost 1 year younger in age. Okay, that's a statistic you can pull and look at. Okay, the amount of games, from each team, they average 32.9 games of junior experience with their players versus 68 games with the Metro Jets. Okay, in other words, the team has 1,352 games of experience versus the Metro Jets of 1,706 games of junior experience. These are stats that you can pull up and look at, and you can start saying, maybe I need to just go out and look for an older player that's got 60, 70, 80, 100 games of junior experience and bring him on the team for junior experience. It doesn't necessarily hurt the model that you're on. If your true model is you want to bring in Ohio players, first of all, there are Ohio players like that out. I looked up the list of guys that are at that level, and they're out there. They're in different organizations. The second thing I'd look at is, the roster, the Mavericks roster has only 3 or 4 foreign players. Now, this league allows a lot of foreign, the the average, the league average is about 11% players from Europe or elsewhere, and more than 16% of Canadians. Well, you put those two numbers together, that's 27% plus. 27, 28% plus. That's almost a 30-year roster. Is there enough effort being put into bringing in players from other areas to bolster that local talent? Now, once again, if Ohio is really in the place where they're saying we want to grow local talent, we want to develop local talent, we want to get these players to move up to the next level, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a whole roster. Nobody's stopping them from doing that except themselves. So that would be one of the biggest things. The other thing is, in comparison with the Metro Jets, I'm going to pull up. Let's see if I can. No, I'm not going to pull up. I'm just going to talk about it. You go to the Metro Jets website and you look right across the board. They have their scouts, their coaches. Their coaches have in-depth experience, but they list their scouts, and they've got 3-4 scouts listed on their website. I don't see any of that on the Maverick side. If it's there, maybe they do it. But it would be something I'd promote, and I'd also be actively looking for more on my website. I'd be using my website to say, hey, are you interested in volunteering? Are you interested in getting involved? What can you do to help build the brand and build our program? This is a guy that's owned numerous junior teams and owned a junior team at that level too. It is a hard level, especially if you're going about it the way that Columbus is going about it. It's not, you can overcome every single obstacle though, and it's available to grow to whatever you want it to be. You can't say it's, I'm in an area that's too expensive. You're not. You can't say that you're not around good hockey, because there's lots of good hockey in that area now. And you're in the Midwest where there's lots more hockey in the peripheral, meaning, you can go into the Pittsburgh market, you can go into the Buffalo market, you can go into the Detroit market, and all those areas have plenty of players that can play at that level, let alone what is right around the Columbus side. So I look at these things and I say, there's a lot of simple things that I would point out right away. Now, Bloom, and I know this, but you know this too. I get paid to go into organizations. I get paid to go into teams just to talk about these things and just to try to help people with these kind of things. I'll offer right now, either program. You want an hour of consultation on this? I'll give it to you to try to help these things, because I just don't want to see a 37-1 score again, okay? It doesn't mean that whatever I suggest is going to be the instant Band-Aid that fixes things, but I see a lot of just deficiency on how that team's going about things. Now, that's my opinion. I could be absolutely wrong, and I'd be glad to have that conversation where somebody tells me I'm absolutely wrong. But on the surface, on the face, that's what I see right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think the hard part too is you mentioned it at the beginning. They're not even one of the cellar dwellers in their own division, let alone in the USPHL Premier. And when you have, I know last year before the NCDC West, the USPHL Premier had 79 teams. So if you think of, if you're, in the top 10 in that league, and you ever had to play somebody that's in the 60s and 70s ranked, I mean, that's a whole different universe in as far as caliber of teams. So now they're condensed a little bit to where I think they've got 59 teams. I think a lot of that has to do with what happened West. A huge disparity of top versus bottom. So I think when you see that big of a disadvantage, that it's hard to. This is we do a lot of work with parents to kind of help them understand of what leagues to play in and things like that. The league doesn't necessarily matter what opportunity you're going to get. It's the team within the league that matters most. And not all teams are created equal in any league that you play in. And that's where you got to do your homework to figure out what team is going to provide the outcome, an opportunity that you think you can get. And in this case, when you look at how this game went down, you would think there'd be more parity within the league to where that score couldn't happen. I know the levels that I coach at, that score could never happen. There's no way it could, because one team is not that good compared to the worst teams that are in the league. So I've never had to coach in an environment like that. Yeah, could we lose, 9-10 nothing? You could. It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened in I don't know how many years for anyone in our league, but it could. But 37-1. I mean, honestly, that would mean that pretty much the Metro Jets had the puck on their stick the whole game. Like there was not a puck battle to be won on the other team. Or, I mean,
yeah,
that's just crazy.
I got a chance to watch probably 40-50% of the game. And that's the way it was. And to be honest with you, Columbus, the goaltending wasn't the issue. Yeah, they did everything they could. There was only one penalty in the game. What does that tell you there? I don't know if it says anything. I would look at that and just as a personal opinion and say, if I'm going to go down by 30 plus goals, and this is just a proverbial statement, this isn't a literal statement. This is more of a way of looking at it. I'm going to go down effing swinging. Okay. That's just all there is to it. And every one of those goals would dig in. And, don't get me wrong. If the talent's that much in disparity, it is what it is. And I'm not saying go out there and fight and, because with a younger, lighter team, that's not going to do you any good because you'll probably, if the score is that way, better skilled players that are more experienced in junior hockey, probably if you tried to fight your way out of it, it's not going to help you anyway. But boy, oh boy, I'd throw my body into anything I could. I'd be just doing a lot of things versus
blocking shots, boxing the front of the net,
And the game seemed to me to be a lot of conflict avoidance. That's the only way I can say it. But that's not saying it wasn't going on both sides, because I think the conflict avoidance was going on both sides, meaning nobody on either side was trying to hit. So that is what it is. So another comment just came in. It says, one Trimpe penalty late in the third, Columbus. It shows me that Columbus just played with absolutely no heart at all. That's a tough one to say, no heart, because if you're a young player and a first-year player in junior hockey and you're playing a team that, has the capability of beating you by 40 goals, okay, maybe 50, who knows, because we don't know. I had heard that the make a pass, thing was put into place during the game. I can't remember what, time period that was, but when I say make a pass, that's when you play the four corners and you just try to keep the puck for, a minute or two before you shoot on the net. We all hate it. We all see it at different levels. Usually you see it a lot when you're sharing ice with a peewee team and a bantam team, and the peewee team coach goes, "Hey, why don't we scrimmage at the end?" And the bantam team's got to go, "All right, guys, just everybody's got to pass the puck 4 or 5 times before you shoot on the net, and don't shoot high." Yeah, that's a normal thing. So I don't know. I'm going to stick up and go against what I just said there, because I don't know if it was a case where they just had no desire and no heart. But at the same time, that's what I'd be looking for as a coach. I would look for that, and I'd be stressing, we've got to go out there and we've got to follow through on our checks. We've got to block shots. We've got to get in their face. We got to push them around. And if once in a while we take a penalty or two in this game, so be it. But we've got to show some passion here. That'd be me. Okay. I don't know these coaches. I don't know either one of them. I don't know their reputations in the league. I'm just giving you what my thought is on that.
You can't really, I don't think you can really goon it up all that much in the USPHL Premier, but, I guess to kind of sew up my thought on it is, I don't think it's possible to score 37 goals on a team unless that team just quit. And I don't know where that breaking point was. Like, could have been after 10 goals, could have been after 20 goals, but in order to get to 37 goals, the other team had to have just said, screw this, we're done. And, just kind of checked out for the rest of the game, because that's there's no way you could be in the same league and have that big of talent disparity to drop a puck and play your heart out and still lose by that large of a score. Something had to happen in that game.
I've heard from both coaches, both directly and what they've posted on the discussion group. There's 3 teams. Columbus has had 14 blowouts this year out of 39 games at the time that this happened. The 2 other teams, and I honestly have just forgot to write their names down, and feel free somebody to text or to post the names of the other 2 teams. One of them has 19 blowouts, and the other team has 22 blowouts. So there might be to the point where the coach is just looking and said, "Hey, look, we've we've held the reins in all year long. I'm talking about the winning coach. Hey, we've held the reins in all year long. We got to let the dogs loose. We've got to let them go because we've been, that means that there's in 39 games that a half of their games are played against those three teams, and they've been having to hold the reins in this whole time. That's hard. And maybe there's a little beef between these two coaches. No speculation on this, not trying to get anything stirred up here, but something triggers a 37 to 1 game. We heard what both coaches had to say on this, but it is what it is. So we got conflicting information. One says it's the Aviators and Decatur. The other one says it is Buffalo and Cincy. Maybe those are just the front names and the back names of both teams. So maybe both those are right. I don't know. I don't even know what Buffalo's calling themselves anymore at that level. We used to have the same problem. When Rochester had a team, we had 3 teams. Our lowest level team was playing in this division. And when we would play Buffalo, we'd get 100 shots on net every time we played them. And fortunately for them, we just couldn't do anything but shoot right at the goalie. We had a terrible we thought we had a terrible offensive team, but we're still getting 100 shots on net. We didn't tell them to shoot less because it takes us 200 shots to get 2 goals. So, we were all about trying to, keep the pressure on and get some shots on net. Anyway. All right, Mike, what else? Because I got pages of notes. I want to talk about the league in general. First of all, let me ask you that question, Mike. Do you feel this league should be doing something? Do you think this league should have intervened at some point and maybe, had some kind of adjustment to the divisions? Should they have taken 2 divisions that were, geographically adjoining each other, taken the bottom of one and attach it to the bottom of the other one and just readjust? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that would be one way to do it if they don't want to condense the amount of teams that are in their league, or to move, some that are premier down to elite, or, there might even be a couple of elite teams that can move up to premier or whatever. But
should Columbus move down?
Well, I don't want to go specifically with particular programs, but just in general, if there's that big of a talent disparity within that league, there has to be something to be done, because you can't, like I said before, the team within the league means more than the league itself. But when there's that significant of a difference, you run like even in the NA3, there's certain programs that struggle, right? And they struggle every single year. But when they're struggling, it's not a 15-0, a 20-0, a 30-0 type of game. It's more, they're getting outshot by 40, 50 shots, and they're losing by 8, 9 goals or whatever. It's not that big of a difference, so this does happen in tier 3, but when there's, like you said, 14 blowouts in a given year or whatnot, that's tough. That's not easy to be in that league and to try to promote what you want from a player development standpoint, or more importantly, a player advancement standpoint, when you're like in a whole different universe of caliber of teams.
So my thought on this is, yeah, the league should have stepped in earlier in the year. When you've got, here's the scores just from the Columbus side. I didn't go into the 2 other teams. So you got 3 teams, but here's one. Here's the best of the 3 teams: 11-2, 12-0, 10-2, 7-0, 12-0, 14-1, 8-1, 12-3, 8-0, 12-2, 14-0, 9-1, 14-0, and 37-1. Okay. There was plenty of evidence from September moving forward in this division. There was an issue. Maybe it was, they could have simply readjusted the amount of games each team played, meaning, okay, instead of us playing an equal amount, let's weight the bottom 3 teams amongst themselves and give them more games amongst themselves. Take the top 3 teams or even give them out of division games. Okay, hey, look, we're only going to play each other twice now instead of 4 or 5 times, whatever it is. I don't know that number, but there's a lot of ways to look at this and say, man, the league could have done something. Yeah, the league, remember, this league is built with the top of the pyramid being the NCDC. Everybody knows that, but that's also where the focus is at. So is there an emergency. If this was happening in the NCDC, there would have been a change made within the first 3 weeks of the season. Period. Nobody would allow that to happen in the NCDC. But because it's a division less, it's a time zone away, which I don't know if it is or not, but let's just say it's a time zone away. There's not the same amount of eyes and there's not the same amount of priority put on this. So that bodes the question too, at what point do these teams start standing up to the USPHL? And I'm not talking about Columbus. I'm talking about everybody standing up and saying, hey, we need to address these things quicker. We need to improve this. And, the argument's going to come back. Hey, all you got to do is put a better product on the ice. That's true. But there's 3 teams in one division that are getting the same smackdown at the same time. I don't know if that would have been the fix for this year. Okay. And the other thing too is maybe you do it a little bit like soccer. This used to happen in Western New York all the time. If you didn't play up to the standards, you dropped out of tier 1. Okay. You just didn't hold that tier 1 spot. That was given to somebody else, or you just weren't state bound. It used to be a battle to get there. Now that's with youth. That's 18 and below. I'm not talking about juniors. But the same thing here. Why aren't they relegating some of these teams and saying, hey, look, if this continues next year, you've got to drop down into elite no matter what you want. That's just the way it's going to be. So anyway, let's read a couple comments. Let's see what else is being said here. I think I already put this one up. You got them on the side there too. The goal differential is 70. Just seems like they are stacked. Well, they are, and we'll talk about that in a second. The next comment that came up was Decatur plays Metro, but is in a different division. I think that's the division thing is getting confused with the 2 different Metro Jet teams. I don't really know enough about that situation. I know they've got their development. Oh, somebody responded to it already, saying face it, Metro Jets and Metro Jets development program. Those are their 2 different levels of juniors. So, okay, this comment says it comes down to recruiting. Every year is different. If you look at each division, there are 4 to 5 teams that are competitive in each division. Guessing those kids got frustrated and gave up. Look at the NA3HL with the Yellowstone Quake. They are, and then that's the end of that. Whatever the comments are. Let's see if I can read it here. There are competitive issues in all the leagues. Of course there is. Okay. But there's not 37-1 competitive issues. You don't have 3 teams in a division getting, butt spanked by a team 37-1, 12-0, 12-0, 14-1. There's issues there. Okay. So I'm not buying into the fact that, this happens everywhere. Part of me, and I've got sympathy on both sides of this thing. I truly do have sympathy on both sides of this issue. I'm compassionate to what Columbus is going through, but I think they've got some fixable issues there. Okay. I am not going to hold, myself, I'm not going to hold the Metro Jets accountable for the score. Now, would I have done that? Probably not. Okay. As a coach, probably not. As a general manager of owner, I'd probably have pulled my coach aside and say, whoa there, bring it back in there, John Wayne. We got other battles, but that's me. Okay. I don't know their program. I don't know what their mindset is. Once again, I don't know what the relationship is between these 2 programs, but I can tell you this. I see a lot of fixable issues, and that comment about recruiting is spot on. If you put effort into recruiting, you can be a top team right away. One year we had a horrible season at that level with the team. Now, I was coaching and GMing our top team at the time, and I said, let's just get into recruiting on that team. So we started doing what we do with the NA3HL, with the NUL, with the USHL. We started having our own pre-draft skates, and we started actually attacking other markets. And we went hard at the Detroit market. We went hard at actually in Brighton, which is out a little bit west of Detroit. And it worked. We just started attacking markets that now here's the downside of that right now. The downside is you got beat 37-1. You've got to do some things to shake up recruiting for next year. That means Europe. That means Canada. You got to do some things that players are going to be less skeptical about what your team does as far as scoring and is just looking for an opportunity. That's going to be tough. That's a tough thing to overcome. What do you think, Mike? Am I on the right track there? Am I off? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to change what they're doing for sure. It's either they're, like you said earlier, their players are too young, or they're not at the right ability for the league itself to be competitive at the top of the top of the charts. But I was just thinking, ironically, to this whole situation, I was doing a presentation for another youth organization here in the Chicagoland area, just talking about juniors and helping different age levels understand what the paths are and whatnot. And one of the coaches that was in one of the age levels that I was talking about or talking about juniors with, his son is the one I used to coach that plays for the Metro Jets. And during the example, I asked the team, because I don't know. I talked to multiple different age levels and the parents, and I said, for you guys, playing in your league, how many teams are in your league? And they're like, we got 16 in our league, which is actually a lot. It's usually around 12 or so, and they had 16. And I was like, okay, so when you're playing the very top team in the league or the bottom team in the league, like, what's the disparity like? And no one really said anything. So I'm like, well, where are you guys ranked? And they're like 16. So they're at the very bottom. And I go, okay. And the another coach in the room was like, we just played the first place team last week and we lost to them by a goal. And it's like, so my point is, within your league, there's 16 teams, and the disparity in talent is still such where a bottom team can beat a first place team. Or, if you're somewhere in the middle of the pack, there's a lot of parity. When you go to play juniors, when you're talking about 50, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 teams in a league, not all teams are created equal. And I asked, this coach, I said, your son plays for the Metro Jets. They're one of the top USPHL premier programs. What is it like for you guys playing in the league? And he's like, well, we've had multiple games this year where we've won by double digits. And he goes, there's really not good parity because, you're going to face a team that really shouldn't be on the ice with you at the same time. And that's, again, with what we do as a show and what we do as a career, you and I, of like helping people understand these paths. These are things you have to look into to see, there's going to be teams reaching out to you from all over the place that you've never even heard of. It's a new team here and a new league here and all this stuff. You have to do your homework to understand what are these teams. Don't necessarily look at the league they're in, because again, a program within the league could be completely different from one team to the other.
Yep, I get that. So would you do anything differently if you were running the Metro Jets? If you're behind the bench on that team?
I mean, I don't know how the game went. You know what I mean? Like I said, if they were still playing their number one unit and running the score up and things like that, and it just was getting out of hand.
It was 37-1. They were running the score up.
I understand that, but if it was their third and fourth line players running the score up, then credit to them. At some point, these kids also are trying to make an impression for college teams to see them. So calling off the dogs and not getting 1, 2, 3, 4 more points, that could determine whether or not they get an NCAA D3 opportunity or, a quality D1 college club team looking at them. Yeah. So I'm not going to penalize any of my players and say, don't put up any points in this game and risk an advancement opportunity because you're 7 points shy of where you could have been or whatever.
The roster was a pretty good standard deviation. It didn't look like one kid got a 12-point game. I think I saw a 7-point, game, but 37 goals, it's kind of, it's kind of like throwing darts at a wall. You're going to hit the wall. And, I think I think it's reasonable in a 37-1 game that there's, 7 points for a couple players, If I saw 15 or 20 points, then I'd be like, they're just trying to freaking smoke up the standings so this kid, gets into the all-star game or top prospects or whatever the hell they're calling it, or maybe they want the kid to be, considered for the MVP for the year or something like that. And I've seen that happen more and more often than not when there's a score like that. And if you see a score like this and you see that there's 2 assists on every goal, that means that the team actually went back and, made sure that there was 2 assists on every goal, because usually officials at about 8 or 9 goals, they start putting down the goal scorer and maybe 1 assist. That's nature. That's natural. That's just that's something that officials do. They're not going to try to load up the score sheet. I did not look at that side with the Metro Jets to see if that was, but that's usually the case where they're trying to they're hungry for points for whatever is going on there. So
yeah, and you got to think too, if there was penalties getting called and they were putting their top unit out on the power play to continue to run up the score, that's a little bit bush league. We wouldn't want to be seeing somebody do that, but there wasn't any penalties in the game for that to happen, so they were still scoring 5-on-5 and whatnot.
So one of our Facebook users, just so you know, folks, if you go on to Restream, and I think it's restream.io, and you go into there, you can and I believe at the beginning of the broadcast that pops up on the chat screen, you can actually register to be on the Restream system, meaning when you type in your chat on YouTube, if you type in your chat on Facebook, it actually shows up with your name. So I would suggest that so that we don't get as many people this as Facebook user. But we got this one up. It says, let's talk about the money, please. Okay. I mean, first of all, this is tier 3 and this is Midwest tier 3. Okay. Both of these teams are in NHL markets, which means that entertainment dollar for, watching hockey, the NHL just vacuums it all up in both markets, Columbus and Detroit. You're not going to get entertainment dollars where people go, hey, let's go spend money and watch a junior game. You got to work really, really hard to market to get butts in seats. You got grandmas, you got girlfriends, and once in a while your parents. And maybe even your parents get sick of watching hockey by that
Your
point.
billet family.
Yeah. So in billet families, that's the norm. And guess what? Usually billet families don't pay. And, the player may get a pass for 1 or 2 or even his family. I don't know. Every team works that way, that different. So, both these teams, if you get 100 or 200 fans in the stands, that's a good night. Okay. That's a good night because not only that on your disposable dollar, but any Division I programs in your area, they're going to scoop away a lot of the entertainment dollar for hockey fans. Okay. In Detroit, you've got, Windsor right across the border, Sarnia not that far away, Saginaw not that far away. They got major junior hockey sitting there. They've got the University of Michigan. They've got Michigan sitting right there. They've got quality, not all of it, but some of the high school is quality, and high schools will outdraw juniors. I've been doing this for 30 years. Good high school hockey will outdraw anything you're doing. You got 2 rivals playing in our area. It's like McQuaid against Aquinas. That's the 2 private schools. And when they, if they're both decent, they go at each other, buildings packed. Okay. Irondequoit playing Greece, buildings packed. You got let's say we're the best junior team at our level, and the number 2 junior teams coming to town. Hey, we get 150 people. That's just the way it is. We would hope for a high school game on the rink next to us that was 2 hours ahead of us. So we get the trickle fans that come over to our rink to watch the game. And we would beat the high school team by 20 goals. That's just junior hockey versus a local high school team. So, when you look at this and you say money, these are tuition-based teams that aren't bringing in revenue from any other source. So they're paying for ice time, travel time, and equipment, and maybe some salary for the coaches. That's the reality of it. A bigger organization like the Metro Jets can actually have more of a salary for their junior program because they've got lots of things going on. They've got, they're controlling AAA, AA. Are they running AAA at Metro Jets or just AA?
No, just AA.
They got a lot of AA teams. They've got a lot of development stuff going at the rink, different kind of development. I'm talking about on ice, skills drills, things that improve players. They got many things to do. That's what we did to support our juniors. Juniors was a way to get a little bit of a cherry on top. We made our money through private lessons, clinics, summer camps, showcases, and we did a huge girls tournament that had teams coming in from all over North America. Those things paid for our junior coaches. Our junior program didn't bring in, and that's when we had, multiple levels of junior teams. When we had one junior team, it was even worse because when you have multiple layers of junior teams, you can work together with those players to make sure you've always got a solid roster, meaning either moving a kid up, moving a kid down, and making sure things are solid there. You can use your U18 team, your U16 team to help with those. And you can also drop a kid down for the weekend to the U18 team from your junior team to help that team if they're injured or if they've got problems too. All those things may not be available in Columbus. And that's why with that one comment that came on earlier about Columbus about adding a team, multiple teams means multiple work. And there's no synergy unless you have the other things in place too. Okay. You can't just have two staffs and go, we got two teams. It's twice the work for management. It's twice the work for everybody off ice. The synergy doesn't kick in until you have camps, clinics, showcases, tournament teams. You've got private lessons going on. And the biggest part of that is if you got a youth organization that you can merge up with, then maybe some of that stuff can happen. Mike, you're doing this every day too, just like I am. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, because you're talking about at a minimum adding 40 total players between the two teams. If anything, it's more like 60 with 30 apiece on both those programs. So just adding an additional team is a lot of work, because not only do you have to recruit, if you're recruiting locally, to recruit essentially 50 to 60 kids to play on a premier team and an elite team out of the Columbus market, you're asking for a huge task. A lot of these programs in the Metro Jets are similar in this fact that it seems like in the last at least 3 to 4 years, maybe even 5 years now, looking back, the AA midget level has really decreased. In the Detroit market, it's like the Oakland Junior Grizzlies, maybe the Troy Sting, sometimes, like I said, the Metro Jets. There's big boy sometimes from a AA perspective has teams, but in many cases, these kids, instead of playing U16, U18, AA, they're going and playing in a USPHL Premier. They're going into this program. So, good on the Jets to be in an area that has really good hockey, and the AA is obviously really good. So you have to capitalize on that to have a good program. And then obviously they're going to, recruit from elsewhere when you're looking for top players, but they get that base locally from these kids that aren't playing midget hockey, because there isn't a whole lot of options there now, because they're going right into junior hockey.
What I'd be curious to know is, you've got an owner that's the head coach of Columbus. I've seen it before. I mean, one of the best mentors I ever had in this game as I was coming up is a guy named Don Kernan out of Syracuse. Yeah, you're second. You're second. But he was an owner. Now, I don't agree with everything Don does, nor should you when you're in this game. You want to find your own path and do your thing. But I learned a lot from him. He was always the owner, and he was always a coach on his team. I only did it a few times during my tenure, and I usually did it to stopgap something. In other words, we had a problem somewhere, and I would jump in with the other coaches and try to help. With that said, I always question what's the reason why. Is it a money-saving situation? Is it ego-driven? Is it because you're the best option and you're the best coach for that team? So I don't know those answers, but I asked the question, and I think it should be one thing that any parent that's looking at this should ask too, is why the hell, because I believe the guy owns restaurants too. Why the hell are you coaching? Is it just a hobby? Because if it's a hobby, the passion isn't the same as a guy that's making a living doing this. If it's a hobby, don't get me wrong. If a guy's they're out there in junior, there's former Division I coaches. In fact, I believe this team actually had a former Division I coach on their staff at one point. I know the guy. That kind of guy jumping in trying to help you. We've got them here. RIT, Nazareth. They've all got guys that made a living in coaching that are involved now. When I say RIT and Nazareth, that's a Division I and Division III team here in Rochester. They both have coaches on their staffs that are volunteer guys that are just super helpful and want to be attached, even though they're past their days of being, really, really, gung-ho about this, want to be on the road all the time, things like that. So talking about this money situation, that would be one of the first things is, if you're an owner, and if you're an owner out there listening, I'm not talking about these two teams. I'm talking about all junior teams if you're a single owner, that it's a 50-50. Every day is 50-50 on if you're going to open your wallet and put money into the team or if there's nothing to take out of it. But there's never a time when you own a junior team where you're going, oh, this year I made an extra $80,000. Look at that. It doesn't happen at that level. It just doesn't happen. It might happen if you've got all the other things in place that we were talking about, but you're going to get just enough money. Put it together. He's running the roster was thin already, and I don't know how many of these teams. Sorry about that. I'll pull up the. Okay, this is the roster that they ran. Now, don't worry about the names. We're not doing this. I'm just showing you the blanks. There's one player, two players. They're 3 players short. They had a lot of injuries, 2, 4, 6, and I don't want to leave that up for the fact that this isn't about the players. So I'm going to get this down just because I don't think it's necessarily something that we need to look at the players' names. But the point is they're not running a full roster already. And even if you add those other players in there, they're just at enough players to run a junior team, in my opinion. Adding that second team is going to make it twice as hard. And how do you justify putting a second team in when you're in this situation already with your first team? So I just think there's got to be a lot of reworking on this. When people say, let's talk about the money, help me out. What else are you looking for on the money situation? Because I really don't know if there's anything being done wrong. And in fact, if the owner's coaching, that's a salary he doesn't have to pay. Maybe he is that good of a coach where that saves on salary. I don't know. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking from the money perspective, maybe somebody was going down the path of, these kids or families are paying to play in that type of a situation, as if they shouldn't, be paying to play there or whatnot. So I don't really look at it that way because, regardless of if they're paying to play in that junior league or they're paying to play midget hockey or they're paying to play high school hockey or wherever, you still have to pay to play at that point. So, as long as these kids are still developing and, you pointed out, at the very beginning, and I'll go back to it, that program still isn't the worst team in the league. So they are playing games. And I think there was a comment, it might even still be up here, where Kurt said that Columbus went after that game and then ended up beating Cincinnati. So, they're still winning games and they're still beating teams within that league. So I wouldn't attack like the families or the players, like you shouldn't be paying money to play in that situation because, from a program perspective, they're not the worst. They're not the worst in the league. They're still successful by some standards when it comes to standings.
That's another thing you talk about on the positive of this. If they do retain their players, they're going to come back with a team that's a lot more game savvy than they are this year.
Right.
And adding a couple pieces to it could be an extremely positive situation. The other thing too about it is if you're looking for opportunity, we always tell people to look for opportunity. If you look for opportunity, maybe this is a great opportunity for some players next year. I'll give you an example of a kid a former NHLer. His name was Marty Reisner. Marty Reisner, he went to prep school, he went to college, and then he went right to the NHL out of college. When he was being recruited for prep school, he went to a prep school that needed him so he could help turn the team around. When he went to college, and I think he went to BU. No, he was a BC guy. He went to that college because they weren't the number one team. They were struggling at the time, and he wanted to be a part of bringing that team back. He literally had that mindset in his game. I can help that team. I'll look even better if I can take this team and get them up to the top. They actually went to the national championship against Michigan that year, his junior or senior year. I can't remember which one. My point, though, is this could be a land of opportunity for some players that are good enough to be a good premier player that want to be a part of a story about, turning things around. So maybe if I'm looking at this and I've got a kid with the right mindset, I'm looking at Columbus next year and saying, hey, that's a good place. Now, with all the questions that we just threw out there, that's the questions that parents should be asking when they're going in there. Stability, coaching, recruiting, and maybe another question about recruiting, because I think that's really the areas that you need to be putting some time into. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you just made me think of, maybe they went into this season thinking we're going to be younger, we're going to take our lumps, but it's going to make us better for next year. And if you look at how like the OHL or the WHL, that's kind of how they operate, where it's like they'll basically put their team together to make a run in like a 1 year span, where it's like they're always looking 3 years from now. So 3 years from now, the Sioux, I'm just throwing it out there. The Sioux Greyhounds are going to make a run, but this year you look in the standings and they're like at the bottom of the league. Well, they've got a lot of young talent. They've acquired draft picks, and they're looking to make a run in 3 years, and that's kind of how they do it. And once they get to that 3 year window, they either win it or they don't, and they start over again. So it's like they're constantly either rebuilding or contending in that league. And maybe from Columbus's perspective and some of these other teams, that's their way of operating, where it's like, we're going to have a younger team, and then when this team gets to the point where they're in their age out year, they're going to be one of the top teams. And then when all those kids move on, then we're going to start that process all over again. And that's what their plan was. Again, we're not tied to either of these programs to really know what their
Right.
plan is or what their intent is. It's just more a conversation now because of how lopsided that score was.
Well, you did say something about retaining players. You retain players because they see something positive for the next year. You lose players because they see the same old coming up for the next year, and they don't want to be a part of the same old. So how do you excite players? How do Division I teams get excited in basketball, football, hockey? How do pro teams get excited for the next year? They have dynamic players being added to their teams. The staff, the ownership, they're going out and finding some oohs and ahs to add to that roster. So if I'm a veteran player coming back and I'm going into my last year, and I find out that they're bringing in two other guys that are goal scorers, they're bringing in a big sturdy defenseman. Oh man, maybe this is the place.
Yeah.
If teams don't see that, players on the teams don't see that, it's very, very difficult to keep kids interested in playing. I'm getting messages from all kinds of people right now on the back end telling me they want to give me more of the story. Please, folks, I don't need more of the story on this. We probably, Mike and I are both holding back on what we hear, and because we don't want to be rumor starters, and we don't want to take information that we've heard or somebody texted us, emailed us, called us on, and try to run with that. That's not fair to the situation. We're trying to be objective on this, give some input on this, but we're not here to tear people apart, and we're not here to point a finger on either side. The things we're saying are the way we feel, but we're definitely not trying to gang tackle anybody or trying to hurt an organization. If anything, I hope I gave some really solid, and I know Mike feels the same way, some really solid advice to the team that got their asses kicked. Okay. And I also know that I made it very clear. I probably wouldn't have handled the same thing, the situation, the same thing as the Metro Jets, but at no point, am I pointing a finger at them and saying shame, because I just don't believe in that in sports. And I used the analogy when Mike and I were chatting before we went on the air. I said, okay, and this is for everybody out there. If we were all the ownership of a company, whoever you are out there, you're one of us, and Mike and I, and you own a business, and we've got a sales force. Are we saying, God damn, that guy and that number one sales guy, he's incredible. Go, man, go. Or are we saying, hey, why don't you just back down a little bit and keep it closer so the rest of that staff, they feel like they participated and they feel good? No, we're in it for a profit. Just like these teams are, not only their businesses, but with the winners, this goes the spoils in this sport. We talk about it all the time. I talk about it all the time. If you want to be recruited, you want to be on a winning team. Okay. That's it. You want to be on the top. If you're at a showcase, nobody's coming in to watch the bottom teams. The only way you're going to get some eyes on you is if you beg the coach to come and watch you by sending them out emails. And that's fine. You can get coaches to look at you for a little bit of time doing that. But you know how you really get a coach to watch you? Playing one of the better teams. So when they walk in the door, They're always beelining over to the first, second, third, and fourth place teams, and they want to see those matchups. They want to see 1 against 2. They want to see 3 against 2. They want to see 1 against anybody, and they're watching those teams. So if you want to be in that situation, you got to win. So winning is important in sports. Okay, 37-1, that's debatable. Let's set that aside. But I don't pull away from anybody saying, "Hey, look, we needed to win, and we need to keep, teaching our guys how to score, and we're not going to start putting bad habits into the game just to keep it close." So, that's the way I'm looking at that. Mike, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I like to use this analogy all the time with the players that I coach, and if anyone's listened, they'll probably shake their head because they've heard it so many times. But let's change sports, right? Because we do this a lot. If Alabama is playing
Michigan, they lose.
Western Michigan, I'll use my own school. If they're playing Western Michigan and they beat them, 76-0, nobody says anything about it, right? That's expected. Like, they are going to continue to keep rolling their offense because they need to prepare for the next week. Why is that any different in hockey? Why would a team have to completely change the way that they're playing because of the opponent? It's not Alabama's fault that Western Michigan is on their schedule. They got to prepare for the next week. They got to get their players, to have, highlights on tape and things like that they can show the NFL. There's a lot of things that go into these situations. And if they're just screwing around and doing a bunch of, hitching ladders and, all these gimmicks and just making a mockery of the game, that's worse than if they just keep playing football the right way until the final score.
Or maybe they just hand it off up the middle 3 times and punt the ball. That's not going to help anybody either. They've got to they got to unleash, they got to play. And that happens I'm glad you mentioned that, because both in hockey at the NCAA Division I level, there's always a few fluff games at the beginning of the schedule. Sometimes they're against other programs. Sometimes they're against a D3 team. Sometimes, they get a Canadian team to come down and play, but I'm not saying always. There's a lot of times where that happens, where there's fluff games just to get rolling. In college football, it sometimes is the first 4 games of the year for, any major Division I team, where they're playing teams that are way lower, and you expect 40, 50, 60 point differences in the game. And both sides are happy because one's getting exposure and the other one's getting a chance to get, just oil the wheel and make sure everything's going properly. So I agree with that across the board. Let's talk about one thing too. This one says D1 doesn't play club teams. Yeah, they do. Okay. They'll play a Canadian college club team. Sometimes they'll play, remember, ACHA is considered club. ACHA teams will play D1 teams. It's happened numerous times over the years. And you'll also see them play the national development. What's that?
Twice this year. I think Minot State played Denver. I mean, there was a couple different ACHA teams that played D1 teams this year already.
Yeah. So it does happen. So anyway, getting back to this issue, where was I at, Mike? That one threw me.
I don't know.
Go to the
forget
tape.
Where you were.
Yeah, I can't remember my train of thought on that. But anyway, the whole issue here, I think we've killed this. We've been on for long enough. Anybody's got any last comments or anything they want to throw on? The discussion can continue to go on this even when it gets posted. You can keep putting these things up on our Facebook discussion page. They'll stay live. So if you got something you want, okay, we understand. The Canadian U is not club. Thank you. But if you got something,
Minot State, ACHA, they played a D1 team. I think Liberty played a D1 team this year. They're ACHA D1, but it doesn't happen often, but it does happen.
Here's my point, and this statement, throw it off. LOL. The issue, all of this is the parents can't stay out of it. Hopefully the kids have learned something. Okay, this is my point. This is where I was going. Thank you. Whoever just posted that, thank you. You just bailed me out. Okay. I would highly recommend if you were part of the loss on this, that you don't go on and start posting about how this is PTSD and that you're worried about the mental health of your child because of this game. And I saw those kind of comments. Coaches are on our site all the time. I can't even tell you how many coaches. Well, I can. We have several hundred coaches that are junior coaches on our site. We have owners, general managers, and coaches at every single level. USHL, BCHL, NUL, okay, they're Premier, EHL, and we're talking about, and their commissioners. They're all part of this group. So when you make a statement like that, like, oh, Johnny, I don't know if he'll ever recover. He hasn't talked to anybody in 3 days. Okay, that's fine. But if you're thinking that there's PTSD from a game, that's not something you want to be broadcasting out to the rest of the world. Okay, first of all, I don't believe that any hockey game is going to cause PTSD. Okay, I think that's a snowflake way out of things, and maybe you got to let him pull up his own pants from now on. We're going to lose a couple people that are going to drop off our discussion group from that one, but hey, that's the way it is. Okay, you got to toughen up and just let them play the game. They're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. If they got their asses handed to them, okay, fine, move on. Put a plan together, get better, do something about it. But the last thing to do is say, my kid was part of that team and they, come on, grow up on that one. That's all I got to say on that. Yeah. Want to throw anything on that, Mike, or you want to steer clear?
Well, I mean, I think sports in general is all about overcoming adversity. That's the one teaching point from a life lesson standpoint that sports provides kids that other activities don't, and that helps them adjust to their business life, their college life, whatever they decide to do in life. Overcoming all these adversities is what makes you a stronger person, and sports can replicate adversity for kids that have to learn how to understand. So I wouldn't play the victim in this situation, especially if your kid has aspirations of playing at higher levels, because the reality is it's nothing but adversity moving forward. This is when it's easy. You get to college and you're balancing classwork, you're balancing practice, you're balancing in and out of a lineup, you're balancing travel, you're balancing a girlfriend, all this other stuff. It is all adversity. So you got to be mentally strong to be able to get where you want to go in life.
Hey, look, I hope everybody at least, opened up and broadened their views on this. Everything was pretty one slanted. I hope that, that Columbus continues to keep getting better. I hope they get a lot of wins through the rest of the year. I hope, though, that there was some lessons learned from this, and that maybe some people are just doing some self-reflection on every level. Okay. Nobody's looking just to the players. However, the players bear some responsibility to this too. Maybe there needs to be a little bit of pushback saying we need to go harder in practice. We need to work on more structure. I don't know. I'm not trying to be the answer man for that team, but I hope this was good for everybody. And once again, I'm going to throw it out there again. I'm sure Mike will do the same thing, but I can't speak for him. He's got to speak for himself. I'm gladly offering 1 hour of consultation to either one of these teams to work on structure and to work on any kind of formatting they want, including system play, including just how to build out your plan, your vision, website. I mean, all the things that we've been doing for years on this. I'll be glad to help on those things with either one of these teams. And I'll say, obviously, especially for Columbus, if they want to reach out. If they don't want to reach out, that's fine, but I'm offering that up. Mike stays silent. You're the real businessman. See, I tell you, it's the problem I always have. My wife says it all the time. I give away too much. I'm too giving. I got to always charge a price. You don't have that problem. I do. All right, folks.
Sounds like a lot of work, Jeff.
What's that?
I said that one sounds like a lot of work. You should probably get paid for that one.
I don't mind if it helps. Listen, folks, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. It was a nice, fun. Thanks for all the comments. You guys, that's good to have interaction like that. Thanks for that too. Everybody have a great hockey weekend. We'll see you next week. See you. Bye.